Today we're going to talk about the different liveries that Metra trains have. Metra, which stands for Metropolitan Rail, is the commuter rail service in Chicago, Illinois and the surrounding suburbs. Service consists of 11 lines, all radiating out of 4 terminals in downtown Chicago. Out of these 11, one line is electrified and uses electric multiple units. The other 10 are not electrified and use diesel locomotives hauling double-deck gallery cars. So for the passenger cars, there's not a ton of variety. You do have some old aluminum cars with blue and red markings, you have the bicycle cars, and there's some ad wraps, but mostly cars are just silver with a bright front telling bigger trains that they are venomous. Starting in 2025, we will get to see these brand new Alstom built cars, which are going to have a sweet livery. I can't tell you how thrilled I was to find out Metra is actually going to add color to their new fleet. On the locomotive side of things, we see a lot more variety in the liveries. First, we'll cover some of the more standard color schemes, and then we'll move on to the special liveries. Here we have the Old Livery, which I believe can only still be seen on the F40 PH-3 locomotives. It's a nice shade of blue with an orange roof. Some people say the official name of the color is Traffic Red, but I'm Dutch, so that definitely looks orange to me. Next is the, quote, Lightningbolt color scheme. Though it lacks any actual lightning-y design elements, it's still a pretty fresh look. A few of the F40 PH-3s have received this, and with a few exceptions, the rest of the Metra fleet already carries this livery. One of those exceptions is the F59 PHI, which was delivered to Metra starting in 2018. These have my favorite livery. They're silver with dark blue. The reason they look different than the rest of the Metra fleet is because they're actually hand-me-downs. They used to be Amtrak units running on the Pacific Surfliner in California. Recently, the Surfliner switched to Siemens Chargers. However, Metra exclusively wants locomotives with engines built by EMD, so when the F59 PHIs came on the market, Metra was more than happy to take them over. How are you guys liking the weather over here, huh? They never bothered to change the livery on most of these, and honestly, I don't think they should. I'm not saying an F59 PHI in the Lightning livery looks bad. How would I know this? Well, because one actually does exist. Number 79 is the only F59 PHI whose livery was updated. Nevertheless, I just happen to think the old colors match the locomotive really well. Aside from the 3 main color schemes I just mentioned, Metra has some locomotives with ads on them, and the guinea pigs that they're shoving batteries in a couple of years will have a green version of the Lightning scheme, so there's some variety there. Finally, there are the 6 jewels in Metra's battered crown. May I introduce to you Metra's heritage locomotives. These 6 engines each carry their own colorful livery, which commemorate the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and some of the fallen flag railroads that used to run commuter service in Chicago. It's actually pretty common practice for railway companies to wrap certain trains in liveries that celebrate the past or big company achievements. The CTA does it, Amtrak does it, even Pace has a fleet of legacy buses made to look like agencies that are long gone. Over in the Netherlands, where trains are generally yellow and blue, they covered a train in tiny little blocks of those colors, and so from a distance, this made the train appear green, celebrating the railway's transition to renewable electricity. Going back to Metra, let's take a look at the 6 special engines in no particular order. The newest is the City of Chicago locomotive, number 104. This is an F40PH-3 type locomotive and was given this wrap in 2022 as a nod to Chicago. The colors, of course, reflect Chicago's flag, and there's a pretty sweet silhouette of the skyline on the front too. In similar fashion, locomotive number 402 is clad in the colors of the Illinois state flag. Well, the flag's only white, they added the blue. This is an MP36PH-3C. In fact, 3 of the 6 heritage locomotives are this model. The 6 seals on the side of this unit represent the 6 counties Metra operates in: Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, and Will counties. A few minutes after seeing the Illinois locomotive, another special engine pulls out of Union Station. This is locomotive number 211, an F40 PHM-3. The pearly white with red decals reflect the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, a railway which has been gone for half a century. Why does Metra, a public agency, have a locomotive with this old company's livery? Well, because Metra hasn't always existed. For over a century, passenger trains in the US were run by private companies. Many railroads came through Chicago, and most of these had commuter service into the city, as well as long-distance intercity service. In the 1960s, many private railroad companies were looking to abandon their passenger trains and focus exclusively on freight. The US government, somewhat miraculously seeing the value of passenger rail, established Amtrak to take over passenger operations for these railroads. However, Amtrak was created only for long-distance trains, so the private companies were required to keep their commuter rail services in places like Chicago. Afraid that these commuter trains might collapse as well, the state of Illinois created the Regional Transportation Authority, or RTA, in 1974 to begin funding commuter trains in the Chicago area. In 1982, several of these private companies went bankrupt anyway, and the RTA responded by creating their own company to operate these services. That company came to be known as Metra. Metra directly runs most but not all lines in Chicago, though all do carry the Metra branding. On the BNSF line, which is where this particular locomotive exclusively runs, trains are actually still operated by BNSF, one of the rare instances in the US where a freight railroad operates passenger trains. BNSF provides crews and dispatching, while Metra is responsible for fares, rolling stock, and marketing. It's actually the oldest continually operating passenger service in the Chicago area. The line between Aurora and Chicago was opened by the CB&Q in 1864, and the first commuter services ran that same year, sharing tracks with long-distance trains that eventually reached places as far as Colorado and Montana. The CB&Q eventually became one of the companies to form the Burlington Northern Railroad in 1970, and eventually Burlington Northern merged into BNSF in 1995. Despite no longer existing, the CB&Q formed such a large part of the BNSF line's history, so a locomotive was given this wrap to honor it. In similar fashion, locomotive 425 carries a bright red livery commemorating the Rock Island Railroad. This one is probably my favorite, even if it does resemble a Happy Meal. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad stretched from LaSalle Street Station in Chicago across Illinois into Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. Commuter service was run between Chicago and Joliet, which is where the current line still operates. The tracks are owned by Metra, and today it is the only line out of the once famous LaSalle Street Station, though in the next few years the Southwest service will be moved here. The red heritage locomotive is the same color as the long-distance rocket trains that the Rock Island used to run. There's one more locomotive of this particular model that has a heritage livery, And for that, we'll have to go to the Milwaukee District North and Milwaukee District West lines, which leave out of the North Concourse at Union Station. Here we see unit number 405 in orange and brown, honoring the Milwaukee Road. If you find it weird that Chicago has two commuter lines named after a city they don't serve, it's because these lines used to be operated by the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad, more commonly known as the Milwaukee Road. An interesting fact about this railroad is that the tracks in Chicago were never electrified, but there were over 1,000 miles of electrified tracks in rural Montana and Idaho. The trains, which were considered some of the highest quality passenger trains in America, carried a bright orange livery, which is what the Metra heritage locomotive honors. Today, the two Milwaukee lines are owned by Metra, with the newly formed CPKC Railroad having the right to operate freight trains over the routes. You can find number 405 making runs on both lines. Ogilvie Transportation Center serves as the terminal for the Union Pacific North, Northwest, and West lines. Until 2024, they will remain operated by Union Pacific, much like the BNSF line. However, operations will switch over to Metra next year. The tracks will continue to be owned by Union Pacific. These are arguably some of the most interesting lines in the system, with one being the longest, one going the farthest west, and one having the only station outside of Illinois in Wisconsin. Oh, and then there's the fact that they run on the left. But that sounds like a story for a whole nother video. Subscribe to Trains Are Awesome so you don't miss it. The Union Pacific lines used to be operated by the Chicago and Northwestern Railway, which was taken over by the Union Pacific in 1995. Chicago and Northwestern was famous for its so-called 400 trains, which were intercity trains between Chicago and places like Minneapolis. However, they were also very active in the commuter business. The names of the lines were the same as they are now, so yes, that means that there was a Chicago and Northwestern Northwest line. The Chicago and Northwestern experimented with a lot of their trains, and they may have been the first railroad in the US to use cab cars and head-end power, both which are very common today. Their livery was yellow and green, so Metra has converted F59 PHI number 90 into a lean, mean yellow and green machine. It runs on all the Union Pacific lines. What's fun about the Chicago and Northwestern is that there are still a lot of relics of it hidden throughout the city. There are maps and posters hanging in apartment buildings, emblems on bridges, and there's even an entrance to Ogilvie that still displays the name. Those were the 6 heritage locomotives operated by Metra. But wait, there's more. Making their first appearance on this channel, these are the SD70 MACHs, or Machs. I don't actually know how to pronounce it. Mach is easier and makes them sound fast, so maybe I'll stick with that. These are freight locomotives that Metra has bought and repurposed for passenger service on the BNSF line. I have quite a few thoughts and opinions on these, but I think that warrants a dedicated video, so stay tuned for my SD70 Mach video sometime this summer. Rather than having the standard Lightningbolt, these have a light blue body with orange accents. I have to say, it's a pleasant color combination. Remember how we saw locomotives honoring the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago? Well, these locomotives are in the colors of the Regional Transportation Authority, or RTA. The state of Illinois founded this agency in 1974 to take over transit operations in the Chicagoland area. Today, Metra, the CTA, and PACE are all under the direct authority of the RTA. Perhaps with their 50th anniversary approaching, Metra decided to commemorate them with this new livery for their new locomotives. Before I end the video, here's how I would rank the 6 heritage liveries, from least favorite to favorite. Of course, everybody's preferences are different, I just happen to like bright colors on trains, but feel free to drop your ranking in the comments. Can you think of other cool wraps Metra could give its locomotives? Maybe a cannonball livery for the Southwest service? Or perhaps 210E should get a special Valentine's Day livery? Thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed today's history lessons, my next video will be discussing some of the future plans Metra has announced. Stick around, check out some of my other work, and subscribe to Trains Are Awesome. We'll see you next time.